In today's video, I'm going to talk about why you need a podcast coming up. So last week I was interviewed by Josh Hall. Now this interview was very, very interesting because we covered quite a lot of topics. In fact, here it is on YouTube. It was recorded on Zoom, but it's also a audio podcast. So this interview was very, very eye-opening for me. I know sometimes, or in fact, most of the time, I tell you guys that you need to do this, you need to do that. Most of the things that I ask you to do, I actually do myself. But now I'm going to be talking about podcasting. And I've been procrastinating about creating a podcast for a very, very long time, even though I know about the benefits. Now, I already created a podcast, but it's not a podcast. What I did was, and this was cheating by the way, I would take the videos that I create on my YouTube channel and then just post them onto the podcast. But that's not the kind of podcast that I'm talking about. The podcast I'm talking about is where you get to record specific audio. In this case, like what Josh Hall has done, this was a discussion that we did, which went over quite a lot of topics. So that is different to just taking your tutorial video and putting it on a podcast. So that's why I'm saying that I was cheating when I did that. So the reason why having a podcast is important is because we're trying to establish that know, like, and trust factor. So this is what makes people buy what you're recommending. It makes people take action because they feel like they know you. So the best way for people to know you is obviously for them to see you and hear your life experiences, hear your stories, and all that great stuff. So this is why a podcast as an extension to your promotion or your brand is very, very important. So during the discussion, we discussed about podcast, and it hit me at that moment that I was doing all these tutorials, over 500 videos, and people don't really know me. They probably know me as the Divi guy, but they don't know me as me. They just know me as the guy that does web design tutorials. And to be honest, that is not good enough. If you're creating a brand or you want people to know who you are, you have to extend beyond just the tips that you're doing. So this is where the podcast comes in, or even a vlog. So the podcast is where you get to tell your story, how you got started, your beginnings, your struggles, and how you overcame them. So this is why a podcast is kind of like an extension of your branding. So when I do a tutorial about, say, Divi and how to create a contact page, I don't get to tell my story in that because people that are watching that just want to go in and know how to do that particular thing that you are teaching. So there isn't enough scope to really talk about your life, your experiences, what you went through. And this is why the podcast really fits in properly. Now, another way of really showing like a behind the scenes of who you are and what you do and to get people to know you is to do a vlog. Now, a vlog is more complicated. To be honest, I tried it and it is time consuming. And you don't get to do a lot of that kind of content unless you probably do it like once a week. But what I noticed is because I'm creating a lot of content here and I'm trying to share as much information as I can, when I do something that takes me really long, I get bored easily. I like doing something that I'm interested in, that I'm excited about. So right now my goal is to create as many video tutorials as I can and share as much knowledge as I can on my YouTube channel. And then maybe later on when I go to a stage where I'm creating maybe one video a week, that's when I can really focus on doing the vlog. But as I mentioned, it really takes a long time to get it up and running and to be consistent with it, or at least for my case. Now, let's talk about the podcast. Now, the podcast is much easier because I don't have to change locations. I can just create my podcast where I am right now because this is my microphone. I can just record it. So that makes it much easier. So here's the deal. I know I'm encouraging you to create a podcast. I'm talking a proper podcast. I'm going to do the same. And my very first podcast is going to be my story, how I got started with all of this, my background, all that good stuff. So that you guys get to know who I am and who is behind this mic, not just the guy who does the tutorials, but getting to know who I am. So I'm going to lead by example and start my podcast. And I also would like to encourage you guys to create your own podcast and just talk, because a podcast is a totally different medium. When people watch tutorials, they're on the computer, they're just watching your tutorials and that's it. But with a podcast, people can watch it while they're commuting. And to be honest, I also listen to podcasts. So I listen to podcasts while I'm driving, or while I'm playing it on the radio, or when I'm on the train and I'm commuting. That's the time I get to listen to my podcast. So if you want to be a content creator and you want to be successful in creating an online business, you need to create your podcast, and this is part of your branding. So my podcast is going to be released soon. In fact, I'm going to do 3 episodes so that I don't want people to listen to one and then, I have a long gap where I don't have any content. I want this to be consistent, as I am consistent with these videos. So I'm going to create 3 videos ahead of time. 3 podcasts ahead of time. And I will also share the process and how I'm actually creating it and the tools that I use to create this podcast. So it's going to be fun. And to be honest, I'm kind of nervous because I haven't done a podcast before. Now, I know some of you will be saying, hey, Matt, come on, get out of here. What do you mean you're nervous? You create all these videos anyways. But the reason why this is different is because I'm not doing a tutorial. If it's a tutorial, I'm comfortable with that. I've been doing this for ages. But creating a podcast and just speaking on the mic, it's going to be a challenge, because finding what to talk about and keeping that flow, that's going to be really, really challenging. But the idea here is, once my podcast is up and running, of course, I'd like you to listen to it and to rate it on iTunes. I want to make it easier for any of you that are also trying to create a podcast by sharing it here. So once you create your podcast, you need to send us a link to the podcast so I can share it with the community so that we help each other grow our podcast. So that's the idea, and that's what's going to be coming up very, very soon. So create your podcast, start thinking about it, and start thinking about how you're going to structure it and make it more exciting. But anyway, like I said, I'm going to lead by example, and mine will be coming up very, very soon. All right, guys, that's all I have for you today. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.